welcome back to the Code Study Nook. This is lesson 2. Today we're going to continue our lesson in OOP, Object-Oriented Programming. Java, more specifically, is a language that does not understand regular English as we know it, so we cannot go at 10 plus 5. If we were to do this, the computer would just not understand what our command is. In the last video, I gave you a simpler example showing you that I'm not just able to add 10 plus 5, but more so I would have to create conditions or variables and then interact with those variables within the program. I did want to clarify, you can actually add the x plus 5 inside of this printout statement. The other video I used as an example, however, it is not always the case that you need to have two different variables and then store values in them to add numbers. You can always just use the export statement or the printout statement, system that out that print, and it will actually add the values that you store inside of it. I just used that as an example to show you how organizing data is in essence what you have to do throughout your programs. Today we're going to briefly go over class, objects, and methods. And I'm going to do this by using the public class main, public static void main, and just explain to you overall what it is that you're seeing in your screens. So with every code, like mentioned earlier, you could not just type in code, you must have everything organized. You are going to need to have these two statements over here if you are using Java. The first statement is called public class main. So the way that I like to think about it, in here you would have different packages that you'll create as your code becomes more and more complex. And then over here is where you will find your main method. So the way that I like to think about it, your package will be here, which is kind of like a folder, and then you will have your class, which is over here. It's declared over here. Think of the class as a piece of paper. Then you will have your main method. The main method are the empty lines that you will see inside of your piece of paper or your notebook. And lastly, you are going to have your code, which is everything contained within this main method. When you're looking into this line, think about it in terms of a spell, right? You would not be able to run any of the code without these two first lines. I commented this out so that the computer does not read this as a code by using these two forward slashes. So once I erase that, my code looks good again. The same thing is going to happen for this over here where it says public static void main. And this part over here is the method declaration. So this is basically telling the computer, hey, I am going to be writing code and I want you to grab all of this code because I am going to be using it. Now, classes are interesting because in the same way that you could have a public notebook or a private notebook, which would be, I guess, a diary, there are different kinds of classes, right? So you can have a public class, you can have a private class, and a protected class. For now, just know that the word public should always be in your class declaration. And then you have this word main, and all that this is doing is telling the computer that this is your main class, right? And inside of your main class, you're going to have your main method. Main methods need to be contained within a class, which is why you have the public class main statement above the public static void main statement. So this is always going to come in first. Again, this is the page inside of the folder, and this is the lines where you're going to write the words. So when you are coding, you can have different classes with multiple methods. Okay, so this word public is going to remain the same, even though if you look at other people's videos, you might see the word private or protected. Just know that if you have the word public, eventually when you have other packages, okay, so other folders, you are going to be able to access everything that's going to be inside of this code or inside of this class with those packages. If it's private, for the most part, you won't be able to. If it's protected, only some parts of different packages or the program are going to be accessed. The word main is actually the name of the class. It is just stating that it is the main class, which is attached to the main method. Whenever you press run and you run your code, the computer is going to come to the main method in the main class and it's going to run all of this code first. If you have other classes, then it's going to run those afterwards. Let's say you have a class that you created in the same project, and in that class you want to have a section where you just declare the different colors that you have in a paint store. This word main can change. You can have a different name for your class, and you can also have different classes or different pages inside of a folder or a package. The main class or the main method is going to be the first thing that your code goes to run when it's executing the program. All right, so we have public, we have class, we have main. Now we have these little brackets going on, and we're just wondering, like, what the heck are these? So your code is going to live within these brackets, right? So if you notice here, there's two sets of brackets at the top and then two here at the bottom. This bracket over here and this over here are closing the main method. So this is what's closing all of your code. This is telling the computer, hey, everything within these two brackets is a part of this main method code. So when you press the run button, anything that's inside of here is going to be the first thing that's ran. If I were to have code out here, or if I were to have a new class, right? So let's say I were to try to have a new page, because we said the class was a page. Just an example, if I were to have a new class and then a new method, it wouldn't be the main method, it would just be a new method. That would not be run first. And then this bracket over here closes the entire class. Your code is not going to be able to be executed if you are missing any of the brackets. So make sure that you have one for each, one for the class and one for the main method. So the next thing I wanted to mention is that syntax matters, right? You're gonna get a lot of syntax errors. You're gonna have a lot of your code not running because of syntax errors. In this word public class main, you can't just write public in all caps. You can't even write public with the capital P. It's going to give you an error message, and that is because Java and almost every programming language is case sensitive. So you need to be very mindful. This is where the colors are very helpful. If you notice that your word squiggly lines on the bottom or it has a red line, for the most part there is something wrong with that word or that keyword. Very briefly, I want to go over comments. So comments, I kind of showed you guys earlier in the video. Comments are things that you're able to write within your code, and it would not actually affect the code, right? So I can comment out code, and this is going to make it so that when I press the play button, nothing is showing down here. And at the moment, by adding the 2 forward slashes, this is allowing only me to see this code or anybody that's accessing my program. When I remove it and I press play, now the computer is going to do the sum and it's going to give me the output in the console. Write notes to yourself. So adding my fruits. Okay, you can do that to comment adding my fruits. Okay, so what can we write inside of this main method, or what kind of code can we just write? Inside of this main method, we will be able to write our code and we can finally have objects. So objects have properties, right? So objects can either know something or they can do something. So they have a behavior or they have some sort of property, right? So in the same way that a car has properties, it has a certain color, it could have a certain shape and a certain size, objects also have properties. They also have functions the same way that a car has a function. So let's go back to our example of the apples. So we have integer, which is a variable, and we're going to go over data types in the next video, but just know that int is a part of a data type, which is primitive. So we have integer apples equals to 10. So this right here is an object, and it is just used to store data. You can also create empty objects, so you can do int oranges. However, we're going to leave oranges empty. Okay, so the way that we leave it empty, we just use a semicolon. Semicolons are really important. Every line of code is going to need to end in this semicolon. If I don't have it, it's going to give me an error message. If you notice here, it's giving me this squiggly line. Here it's giving me squiggly lines. That is because you need to end every single line of code with this semicolon. Really important, by the way. These statements do not need a semicolon. For some reason, I don't know why. I just know, again, they're like a magical potion and they're like special in and of itself. However, everything inside of the code does need to end with it. So integer oranges, and then I have a semicolon. I'm going to add a comment here that says this box is empty at the moment. So in here I have two objects, and both of these objects right now do not have a function. They either store information or they have the ability to later on store information. The last object that I wanted to show you guys was a scanner. So a scanner object is going to be a little bit harder, but I just wanted to show you guys one that rather than just have information, this one has a function. So the way that you import a scanner, you need an import statement up here. I don't remember the import statement, but I do know how to call on a scanner. You use the capital S and boom, right here you have scanner. So in the same way that you have your box called int and you need to name it, you have your scanner and you just need to name it. So we're going to name the scanner, let's call it input. Scanner input. And then we're going to equal new scanner. Okay, and inside your write system that in. Okay, let's see how this looks. It's giving me one error. Line 13, cannot resolve symbol system. So if you notice here, this is coming up as red. That is because the system needs to be capital. And then it will appear in white, and we got it. Let's call the scanner keyboard. Okay, so this scanner called keyboard, we had to create a new instance of the scanner keyboard. So this right here, if you notice, once I wrote this whole statement, it wrote an import statement for the scanner. So this object looks completely different than these two objects, and that is because these first two only store information, whereas this one has a function. I'm not gonna go too much into detail for scanners right now. Just know that this particular object gives me the ability to type in input. So let's say I'll print a question down here, and then I'll call on the scanner, and the scanner will allow me to type a response. So now that we have our three object examples, I want you guys to know that these first two objects are called user defined. We are creating the object ourselves and we're giving it meaning, or we're adding value to it. Even if you were to create an object and leave it blank or leave it empty to later add value to it, that is also user defined. This object over here is more complicated, and that is because it is Java building class, right? So it is engraved in the program and it has its own function and it's very specific. This object in essence is saying, hey, I am going to use that scanner that you have saved in the system. I'm going to make a copy of it and I'm going to call my copy keyboard, and I'm going to declare to the computer that, hey, this is actually a new scanner, not the one that you have saved. This is a new scanner that I'm going to use on my system. And then this line over here is saying system.in. So it is importing it officially into my main method, or again, into my program. So this is a very general example of 3 kinds of objects that you're going to see in Java. On our next video, we're going to go over variables and print out statements.